What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaR. JaR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. And we're back this week for another Conspiracy Take the Crown story. This one is called Leovold's Dossiers. And it's actually kind of funny. In my opinion, it's a little funny because they are all dossiers by Leovold, except for one. And that's because that one is about Leovold. But it's a way to give us information on him. This whole story was seemingly, in my opinion, comedic. You know, it was like the comic relief story for the whole thing. It also, because it's a review, and I'm going to be a little critical here, so it happens, I thought this story was a little bit of a cop-out. Story was good. It introduced Leovold to us. It was funny. But besides all of that, it was very repetitive. It just told us everything we already knew. Yeah. Maybe it added like one thing here or there, but I don't think...
It was kind of treating us like we hadn't read any of the other stories.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they were hoping that they were going to get a huge audience for this one story and of people who weren't reading the stories before. I don't know. I don't really understand the motivation there, but...
Yeah, I don't really either. And it was really confusing, right? Because, first of all, very short story, which a lot of these stories have been short.
But this one was kind of annoyingly short.
It was annoyingly short, and especially because of the fact that it just spent most of the time telling us things that we already knew, but in a slightly different way.
Right. At the end of the story, he said to me, "And that's the end of the story." And I said, "But wait, I don't understand. Yeah. I feel like we didn't learn anything."
And my response was that we did a little bit. There was like, a piece of information here, a piece of information there. You kind of get the idea that Leovold and the other elves from Trest, because he's the ambassador from Trest, he and the other elves from Trest are seen as spies, but they're not really, like, the people who are at least giving information to Marchesa as the queen don't see him and or his spies as a threat in any way, which I guess is a good thing, because it really does seem like Leovold is aware of all of these different goings-on, whether it be with Adriana and the force that she's trying to bring up. He's aware of Grenzo and the fact that Grenzo is not keeping the prisoners inside of the prison like he's supposed to as the warden. He's aware of Selvala and the work that Selvala is doing. And, just kind of, he seems to have his hand in all these different things, or, knowledge of all these different things. And like I said, that's a good thing, right? That's what this story did, is it introduced him to us. It introduced Leovold to let us know what part he was going to play. And I had mentioned last week that I expected that this week would be kind of the big blowout of, Grenzo and Doretti coming in, and Adriana and all of her kind of rebels coming in, and going against Marchesa, and Selvala hopefully taking over and trying to turn it into a republic of some kind. And I feel like if we had that, we wouldn't really have been missing much, even though they felt the need to summarize it here. I think the one big piece of information that we learned that I took away from it is that the guards that used to work with Adriana before she was, forced to retire by Queen Marchesa and she left and started this rebellion, the soldiers that worked with her, or the guard that worked with her, who would have stayed and worked with Queen Marchesa, but who Marchesa saw as people who would betray her or who weren't loyal enough to her, she threw them in jail. And because of Grenzo not caring about keeping the prisoners in jail, Adriana was able to break them out. And again, there was a piece of humor there where, he mentioned, like, where Leovold mentioned pies and people poorly dressed as cleaning women or something like that. So again, it was a method of comedy, and I will say the comedy worked. It was funny. I'm not going to say it wasn't funny. I am going to say that I don't know that it was necessary. I thought that this was very much filler, and as I said, in last week's video, if you missed it, go ahead and check it out. But as I mentioned in last week's video, in much more detail than I'll get into now, I thought that Shadows over Innistrad, but specifically Eldritch Moon's story, felt very compressed and rushed. And if you're going to rush one of your main set stories and then, I don't want to say waste time. Waste time seems a little bit too harsh, but put out a seemingly unnecessary story, or not give us enough information in this story and make it seem like filler, then you have no excuse for why your Eldritch Moon story was so compressed.
It feels a little offensive to those of us who care a lot about the story, because it makes us feel like the insignificant, funny stuff that you're kind of just including because you have nothing else to write is kind of more important to you to include than things that are actually going to tie off loose ends.
Well, and I will say that it's not because they don't know how to put comedy into the important parts of their story.
Right.
Because they've absolutely done that before. We've seen that many times.
Yes.
I mean, and again, the comedy usually comes from the interactions between characters and kind of them throwing snark back and forth at each other. That's the funny stuff.
Or, the thoughts that Jace has.
Yes.
Because usually that's inside his own head more than it is talking to someone else. But.
Yeah, usually the funny conversation pieces come from Liliana, and or seemingly anyone at all associating with Gideon, because they just treat him like an idiot, which is super funny. But that's what I'm saying, right? All those interactions are comedic, and yet are part of the important piece of the story where you're getting story, you're getting advancement. And throwing comedy in as a part to break up a long, maybe even relatively serious story is fine and is welcome. There are certain stories where we've said on this very series, like, this story was entirely serious, there were no jokes, and that's fine because you needed that, right? The story with Nahiri versus Sorin, the campaign of vengeance and Nahiri's wrath, that didn't need any comedy.
No.
It was real good, and it didn't need an ounce of comedy in it. But there are certain other stories where it's like, okay, that joke sprinkled in there was funny. And it was nice, and it was appreciated. It doesn't take away from anything. But to make an entire joke story...
Yeah, that seemingly didn't tell you anything important. Or if it did, it was very sort of inconsequentially important,
right?
If that's even a thing.
And it seemed like, almost like, if you want to chalk it up to television, talking about different entertainment mediums, it's when a sitcom has been running for years and they do that one flashback episode, which really all they do is just turn it into a clip show of prior funny moments from the show.
Right.
And it really is a cop-out. And there are some times where those shows break the fourth wall and they're like, oh, I saw myself, I think of Scrubs. I'm a huge Scrubs geek, and they said, I thought back to all these funny moments like a sitcom who ran out of comedy ideas, and then they just showed clips from past funny things. And they owned it, right? They said, look, we don't have anything right now, so this is what we're doing. This seemed like that with no irony whatsoever in what they were doing, and it was a little disappointing. And I feel like that's the first time I've said that. There have been critiques that we've had, like that one story with Thalia was real long. Yeah. Too long.
Yeah. And it made the story unlikable.
Right.
Even though the writing itself wasn't bad.
No.
It just this, in the end, the story as a piece didn't work.
Right. And again, if you're, I'll chalk it up to television because that's what I'm talking about right now. If you look at a medium like television, even if you have a series where each episode is an hour long, right? There are certain times where you will have a season finale or a mid-season finale that is an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and usually, if it's done correctly, if it's done well, you don't notice that, right? Because you watch it, and at the end of that first hour, they give you a reason to stay around for the second hour. Or they just, in general, like, you need to see what happens next throughout the course of the first hour. You don't even notice that it's blended into the second hour.
Right. And then when you're done watching the whole thing, you're still going, wait, that was the end?
Right. And now I have to wait for the next season. Right. But this...
And then you're like, whoa, 2 hours of my life just passed.
Right. And it didn't do that with the not Liliana, my goodness, Thalia story, excuse me. Lots of names in my head. The Thalia story didn't do that. It wasn't that big story where we knew it was coming and we knew it was super important. I mean, again, there were a lot of complaints from people, and we talked about it very briefly, but looking online afterwards and hearing people talk about it, with Brizella being this big thing that it was, there were a lot of complaints from people that Brizella was introduced and then killed off in the same story, and really in the latter half of the same story.
It was like a short period of time.
Because the first half of the story was all Thalia, getting herself to that fight, to Thraben, to that fight, and then wow, we see this giant freaky angel thing, and I'm going to fight it for 5 minutes, and then Sigarda's going to come help me, and now it's dead. And it's like, what was the point of this thing is huge, and it seems like such a big part of the story, but then it was gone in like 5 minutes.
It also kind of made the whole Sigarda thing less important, too. Because it was like, okay, well, Sigarda's going to swoop in, kill it, and it's over. Well,
with the help of... Thalia needed to help. Thalia needed to, become the new Avacyn to do it.
Well, but not really, though. It was, kind of basic. My point is they could have taken it so much further.
Right.
And then, if they had, maybe we wouldn't have been so mad at the end of the story that it was so long.
Right, because it would have been worth the wait.
Because it would have felt less long.
Right.
Because we would have been more invested in it.
Right. But I think that's our point with this story, is you took way too long with the Thalia story, which you could have broken up somehow. At least given us the information in some other way by breaking it up somehow. Or the final story, the Promised End, broken that up somehow so that you could actually stretch out the parts that seemed so smushed together, like Imprisoned in the Moon and Oath of Liliana, smashing those things in at the end and seemingly rushing to get it done. And then 3 weeks later we see, or 2 weeks later, I think it's 3 weeks later, we see this story, and it's like, why? Yeah. Why put this in there? Why not just give us this information? Because the little bits of information...
Or just take the important stuff out and sprinkle it in to another story.
That's what I was going to... Absolutely. That's what I was going to say.
That's going to tell us more information that we're actually looking to know.
Yeah, because the whole Grenzo thing, he could have just said that to Doretti in last week's story at some point, right? The story was not long. So towards the end of the story, when they were talking about... When Grenzo said, oh, well, if we're going to the castle, then that person's on my list, too. I'm not even... He could have said, I'm not even paying attention to the prisons. I'm fully aware that people are coming in and breaking people out, but I don't care. I'm not going to do that for this woman. Done. Now we have that piece of information. He could have even said, I know that it's the guards and that they're being let out by their former captain. Done. We now have that vital piece of information, which, again, I assume that it's vital. It seemed pretty important. Or
at least they're trying to make it seem important.
But it could have been explained away with a sentence or two that would not have in any way felt forced into Grenzo and Doretti's story.
Right.
Because Grenzo would have been fully aware of what was happening in his own prisons. Or the prisons that he's supposed to be controlling. So, it was nice to see about Leovold, and I don't know necessarily how they would have gotten that information in there.
Honestly, I just think they could have taken the prison portion, put it into last week's story, skipped this week's story, and then made next week's story have the Leovold stuff in it. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, and that's the thing, right? We don't know, first of all, as I said last week, I hope that next week's story is the culmination and final part of this story, where we see... Because he said, Leovold said in this story that Queen Marchesa is gathering her troops to get ready for the rebellion of Adriana, former captain of the guard, or retired captain of the guard, and all of her rebels coming in to attempt to overthrow Queen Marchesa.
Right, but they didn't even really talk about that either, because...
No, he just said that the queen is getting ready for it. That's all he said.
And you were like, and I was like, is it that bad? Like...
Right, because we're not aware...
anything about it yet.
Right. And it's, you can kind of read into, you know, the proclamation from Adriana saying, like...
Because there's no, like... Marchesa, like, doesn't know about the rebellion until it happens, right?
I'm not so sure, because, I mean, we don't know what's going on in the background, if she has spies out there herself or whatever, because she seemingly has all this information.
Way of knowing ahead of time how severe it's going to be. So maybe that's why it makes more sense. It's not as severe as what she's preparing for, I feel like.
Who knows? I mean, obviously we'll see, and look, if next week we find out that so much of the information that we were given this week was vital, and you know, there was no way that they could have put it in anywhere else. Exactly. Please. Right? And if that's the case, I'll be the first one to say, you know what, we were absolutely wrong last week, and this is why, and look what happened. But until then, you know, I'm not too happy this week. You know, it was a little bit of a letdown, and especially when you look back. Right, you look back and you're like, but those other stories were so good, and they weren't given the time to be better. You know, they could have been so much better. That Promised End story was fantastic, and it could have been so much better if you had just given it more time, given it more anything, and
just given it a second story. Just split it into two.
And the week after, when they got into conspiracy, and we met Kaya, and then we met Adriana, and then we met Doretti and Grenzo, fine. All of those were vital, and I get that, and so I didn't in any way say, oh, well, I don't know why they put this story here. This is the week. Right. 4 weeks into the Conspiracy Take the Crown stories, and the other thing that sucks, and I'll shift slightly away from the story and to the business of Wizards of the Coast, the business of Magic. They want to sell this set, and I get that, and I have also seen an outcry from, not an outcry, but a kind of a call to arms from other people about this set, right? This set is selling for regular MSRP like any other booster box. It's not selling for Eternal Masters prices.
No.
Right? It's not going to break the bank for you to get a box. It's not going to break the bank for you to play with your friends. It's not going to break the bank for you to go draft it with people at a local game store.
But there's a reason why they're doing that, because it's Conspiracy and it's a drafting format set.
Yes, but there are also tons of pretty valuable reprints in this set. And that's a very good thing. A very, very good thing. And I think the point is, if this does well, this can kind of push us in the direction that we want to be in. Instead of having super valuable premium sets, which are great and I enjoy them, my wallet doesn't. Right? They're very expensive. And I love opening the product. I love having the product. I love opening it for all of you, and I hope you enjoy it as well. But Conspiracy is a lot more fun. Right? Eternal Masters was a great drafting set. It was just debilitatingly expensive. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of you watching this right now who are like, yeah, you know, I wish I got a chance to play Eternal Masters.
Right.
Well, if you can, and I mentioned this last week as well, if you can, make sure to go out and play Conspiracy Take the Crown. Do it, because it's so much fun. If you have a local game store that has a good population of people, maybe even if it doesn't, you might surprise yourself, because this is so different, right? You're not going to get, I mean, we're Vorthos players, hashtag Vorthos Pride, and that's very important. You're not necessarily, hopefully, you're not going to get a lot of spiky players who are going there to crush the tournament, you know, or whatever.
They just want to win and collect their prize and make sure that you can't collect their prize.
Which is totally a possibility, right? I'm not going to be surprised if somebody writes in the comments, which you're more than welcome to do, but I'm not going to be surprised if somebody writes in the comments of this video or whatever, Joe, I went to a draft and I didn't have a lot of fun because there were a lot of these people there who only cared about value, and they made fun of me for not making the right picks. The right picks. I picked the wrong cards, or I drafted wrong, which in my opinion is not a thing. I don't necessarily think that you can go to your local game store and look at the guy and be like, but Joe doesn't think so. Like, I'm sure that guy doesn't care. But honestly, in my opinion, if you go and you have a good time and you walk away with some experience, some kind of an experience, whether you learned something or whether you just had fun, maybe you walked out with a new friend, maybe you just had a nice conversation with some other guy who was sitting across the table, or you shared a funny moment where you were like, oh, I drew this card, so I'm going to do this. And everybody at the table's like, what? Oh my God, that's amazing. Like, if you have that kind of a moment, that's a success in my book for that event for you, right? I hope some of you agree with me. I hope all of you agree with me. But if you don't, you're always welcome to not agree with me and let me know in the comments down below. But to me, that's the fun of conspiracy, right? You're going to stab people in the back, but it's not the kind of thing where that person's then going to turn around and be like, you're the worst, I hate you. Like, it's going to be like, oh man, you got me, that sucks.
Right.
And like,
because that's the point of conspiracy.
Exactly. And you move on. Or, two people are infighting, right? They're going against one another, and you just come around and you play a card and it screws over one but helps the other. And so one guy's real mad, but the other guy's real happy. And if you're playing with four people at the same time, the fourth guy's just laughing, I'm sure, the whole time because he's not in any way involved. Or gal, by the way. I just use guy kind of globally. But it's a lot of fun. You should definitely do it. I know for the releases just mechanically or kind of as a cleanup, this story, usually JaAR videos come out on Fridays. At least recently they've been coming out on Fridays. This JaAR is going to be coming out on Monday. We release Fridays and Mondays on this channel, but this one's coming out on Monday because this past Friday, depending on when you're watching this, but the Friday before this video came out, we released a conspiracy opening because I was able to pick up a box, and that's what we did. So you guys should definitely go check that out. I really hope you guys enjoy that. I am sure that it's going to be awesome, but it's up here.
We technically haven't done it yet.
Right, because we film these on Wednesdays, but it was up here. You should definitely go click on that, check that out. I look forward to that greatly. I look forward to drafting it. If you guys drafted Conspiracy and you had a great fun story, let us know. Let the fellow viewers of this show know. Let us know what you did, and if like I said, if you get a chance, definitely go out and draft it. I'm not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. I wish, but we're definitely not sponsored by Wizards of the Coast to say that, to help them.
Wizards.
Yeah,
Wizards.
Yeah. Exactly. If you want to, you give me a call. But no, seriously.
Leave it in the comments that you want to be our sponsor.
Yeah. But yeah, if you get a chance, I definitely recommend going out there. Like I said, I'm not paid to say that. I just know how much fun it is. I hope. I think we're good on this review, right? Yeah. It wasn't the best story in the world. If you're looking for something a little bit funny, it's not a waste of time. But in the grand scheme of things, it kind of was. That's our overarching review.
Right. If you're looking to not listen to what I say and read the stories first before you watch these videos, you can use these videos to sort of help you decide which ones of the stories you're going to go back and read. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to save time and not read them all, then don't read. I would suggest this not be one of them.
Right, and don't read the Thalia one. No, you should definitely read the Thalia one. It's worth your time, but make sure you've got about 2 hours to do it because it was real long.
Do that when you've got time and patience.
And as we always say, I think you should do it with your friends as well. It's just it's fun, and again, as Amy just said, we've now told you which ones are worth it and which ones aren't.
Yes.
If you start off and you bring one of your friends and you're like, dude, let's read this story, and then you read them Leovold's story, they're like, who cares? Yeah. What the hell did you do this? Bring me here for this for?
Read them I Am Avacyn or the Nahiri story.
The Campaign of Vengeance.
They'll be like, oh my god, alright, I want to read every single one of these.
Yeah. Or The Promised End. If you're looking for a more of a fun one, the Gisa and Geralf one. Yeah. Or people from Wizards were calling him Geralf. I like Geralf.
I like that too. Geralf sounds stupid.
It does sound stupid, but I'm pretty sure that's even how Mark Rosewater pronounced it, which means that's the correct pronunciation if that's the way that he did it. I say Giralf, and I usually am a big stickler for pronouncing the names correctly, but I'm just so used to Giralf that's what I go with.
Yeah.
So, regardless, guys, thank you so much for watching. As I said, I really hope that you guys get to go out and play some Conspiracy Take the Crown. You should definitely do it. It's definitely worth your time. I haven't actually drafted the set yet, so if for whatever reason this draft format is so much drastically different from original Conspiracy and it sucks, please don't hate me, because I haven't had an opportunity to do it yet either, because the set, as I said, has not released yet as of the filming of this video, but I'm pretty sure they're just going to get bigger and better with it, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much, as always, for watching it.
Yes.
And from the Geek for All YouTube channel, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.